Hey there! Yes, you. Are you in the market for a new Zoomer? You are? How fortuitous. Look no further than the new 2015 Zonda Spacepolitan. It has all the features you think you might need and more. The Spacepolitan has a spacious carrying capacity with a disc diameter of 36 Zorboots and a crew compartment that is an extraordinary 20 Zorbits long, 8 Zorbits wide, and has a truly astonishing headroom of 8 Zorboots. You simply won't find a cabin like it. Not even a premium Lamborghini can compete. Still not sold? You are a truly discerning Zetan. We here at Zonda know the Spacepolitan is right for you. I mean, just take a look at that blended disc design and those frisbee spanning spoilers. How can you resist, I ask? Still not convinced? Well, did I mention she is sporting the brand new 5-ring Zeta drive straight out of Zonda R&D underneath the hood? That baby can get you from your home here in Zeta Reticulon to the Sol system in 60 zircons. Tell you what, act now, and I'll even throw in the tractor beam at no extra charge. That's 3 Brahmin you can abduct with a single ray. You like that, don't you? Of course you do. Every green-blooded Zetan does. You simply will not find a better deal in the galaxy. Wow, it's a good thing I'm not in marketing. I don't think I'd have a day job to rely on if I was. Yikes. Anyways, now that I've broken down the totally real and not made up at all statistics for the UFO from Fallout 4, I'd like to take the opportunity to go on a brief tangent and talk about a real-world, quote, UFO, unquote, or 2. Spoiler alert, it's going to be 2. First, I'd like to talk about the least serious of the examples I have in mind, mainly because I want to talk about the Nazi Bell or Die Glock in one of my videos, and I doubt I'll get a better chance, other than maybe when I get around to covering Fallout 3's UFOs. When I do get to that point though, thanks to the Mothership Zeta DLC, I'm pretty confident I'll have much more to talk about then with Fallout 4's UFO, which basically has no lore. For those of you that don't know about the Die Glock, I don't blame you. It's an enigma that is likely more conspiracy theory than fact, and who has the time for that? Well, I do, so I'll fill you in. The Die Glock was a proposed Nazi Wunderwaffe, or wonder weapon, that was in development towards the end of World War II, that allegedly did a thing. What that thing was, though, well, that's up for debate. But if the History Channel is to be believed, and why wouldn't it be? The Nazi belt was either a gravity-defying flying saucer or a much more plausible time machine to either take Nazi high command to the moon or into the past to prevent the defeat of the Third Reich. Either way, though, the bell was supposedly a wild 12-foot high, 9-foot in diameter bell-shaped device, shocking, I know, that was stored in close proximity to a formation of concrete pillars arranged in the Polish forest, named the Henge, quite dramatically. The Henge was accordingly the launching point for the bell, containing it while she spun up, glowing and rotating, bouncing from side to side off of the Henge like an out-of-control pinball to accomplish, well, whatever it actually did. If it even did that. Anyways, it's a really entertaining story that I certainly didn't do justice. Look it up if you are so inclined. Okay, that World War II itch thoroughly scratched, let's talk about North America's real-world flying saucer. The Avro Canada VZ9 Avrocar, a VTOL Frisbee that first flew in 1959 and was designed by John Frost as part of a series of research known as Blue Skies Research. This is just a fancy way of saying research without a clear goal. You'll love to hear it. Anyways, the US was intrigued by John's concept and ordered a prototype to be created for Project 1794. The Avrocar's saucer shape was integral to her design. This was due to her unique pancake jet engine design, where thrust exited from around the entire rim of the engine rather than from a single point. Sadly, the Avrocar performance was less than stellar. It quickly became apparent that the Avrocar suffered from thrustability issues, in addition to a low-performance flight envelope, which led to its cancellation in 1961. Luckily for all of us, though, before the project was canned, concept art for the US Army's new Flying Jeeps was already created by Avro Canada. Take a look at that retro, futuristic design. What a treat. I could certainly see a design like this making it into the Fallout universe. Alright, now I'd like to take a somewhat, emphasis on somewhat, serious look at the UFO's design, starting off, as always, with the pros as I see them. I actually really like the aesthetic. Well, other than the rivets. I'll rant on that in a bit. The blended saucer, complete with its spiny disc engine, doohickey, and nonsense dorsal spoilers, gives me solid 1950s, 1960 vibes, and also makes me think of the Jetsons. I mean, slight tangent here. Just imagine how easy it would be to create a Fallout version of the Jetsons. Keep the human family, insert Dogmeter Rex, use the UFO saucer as the basis for the car, and then replace the robot nanny with your favorite robot, and blamco, mac and cheese, by golly, you've done it. You madman. The other thing I'd like to point out is the design work that is done on the underside of the disc. I mean, the player gets to see the underside of the craft for a few frames, at best, if they happen to look up at just the right time to see the UFO crash after level 20. But the designers still went to the effort to create such a visually pleasing pattern on the bottom. You love to see it. Now onto the cons I have with this Magic Frisbee. And unlike the pros, I actually have a fair bit to say here. Let's start off and talk about the elephant in the room, those dang rivets. Am I really supposed to believe that an alien craft manufactured 39 light years away in Zeta Reticuli is put together using rivets? No. Not happening. A civilization that is capable of traveling light years is going to have a better method of joining non-ferrous alloys than riveting. Full stop. You are not going to convince me otherwise. Though, now that I mention it, it's not even really entirely clear to me that the UFO is non-ferrous in nature. It looks like her chassis is covered in a rusted texture, which makes very little sense. Unless the Zetans make a habit of parking their craft on rainy planetoids. I mean, this thing just crashed, so there's no way the Earth weathered it. And it ain't raining in space, so where's this rust coming from? Am I crazy? Well, yes. But about this, I'll let you tell me. Next, I'd like to point out that unlike with Fallout 3's crashed UFO, whose cockpit window is broken, there is no possible way for the Zetan we tracked down in the nearby cave to have gotten out of the craft. There is no door that allows access to the cabin of the craft, above ground or below. There isn't even a portal centered on the underside where I'd assume the tractor beam would have been focused. This is a real shame, as even if just the underside portal existed, it could be logic that the Zetan bailed out of the craft before it crash landed into the hillside. Now, I will say this, we do know teleportation technology does exist with the Institute, so it's not entirely outside the realm of probability that perhaps the Zetans have some sort of personal teleportation tech that would allow them to teleport in and out of the craft. That being said though, I'd still expect doors to be present in the vessel's design. But hey, maybe that's just the ignorant Terran in me talking. In my final con, in a bit of a contradiction to, well, pretty much my only pro, although I do think the UFO looks aesthetically appealing, I think the vessel looks far too terrestrial in nature. Between the rivets, spoilers, and the conventionally shaped fuselage, the lack of ray guns and exotic weapons of any kind, there is not a lot here that really screams alien. I mean, sure, the engine has that alien look to it, and the disc kinda does with all the glowing lights and such, but I really would have liked to see a greater distinction between terrestrial and extraterrestrial designs here. Maybe if that was the case, and we were looking at a flying Tic Tac or something, the lack of doors wouldn't bother me as much as it clearly does. Now, having said all that though, I just spent a couple of hours trying to do better than Bethesda, and in this case, I came up short. The only enhancements I did successfully make were the empty netters, if you know what I mean, of successfully removing the rivets and adding a portal door. Now, I have a couple of questions and observations for you fine folks. Have you ever stopped and thought about the nature of the crash site? The UFO gouged out a pretty significant trench into the 4's floor, and yet is somehow completely intact. Well, other than being on fire. But the fuselage windows are completely fine. The Frisbee looks fit to fly. There's not even a visible dent on her. No components strewn around or rivets popped. She is pretty much in pristine condition considering. I suppose this means she is either made out of ridiculously sturdy material or that an energy shield of some sort was at play here. Speaking of the exterior being in pretty much immaculate condition, how exactly did the Zetan get injured? Does the UFO not feature the alien equivalent of seatbelts and airbags? I find that pretty hard to believe. Also, it's strange to me that there is only a single Zetan survivor. Sure, that can easily be explained away. People do go on drives alone, and other Zetans could have simply not made it out of the craft alive, but I just thought I'd mention it. Next, a question for those of you that played Fallout 3's Mothership Zeta. How exactly did this lone vessel even make it to the surface of the Earth? Last I knew, the Lone Wanderer had commandeered an entire Zetan mothership, and hence that mothership began acting as a shield of sorts, protecting the Earth from Zetan aggression. With ample human resources on board, i.e. abductees, in addition to cryobays, I would have expected this shield to have endured for quite some time. Perhaps it has, and that's the reason why the Fallout 4 UFO ended up crashing. But at least how I remember it, the mothership's ray cannon would have disintegrated a craft of this size. What do you think is up with that, y'all? Finally, since this is a UFO episode, I'd be remiss if I didn't attempt a good Ancient Aliens impression. So here it goes. Could it be that Robert House was in possession of alien technology? 9 out of 10 UFO experts agree it's a definite possibility and theorize that it all began with the Roswell incident in 1947. On that fateful day of July 8th, a Zetan flying saucer broke through the cloud layer above New Mexico, clearly in distress. Soon thereafter, an unearthly blast was witnessed deep in the desert. The United States Army scrambled to secure the alleged crash site. It is agreed among prominent ufologists that the U.S. government obtained the remains of a single flying saucer and 3 humanoid bodies of unknown origin that would later be transferred to nearby Nellis Air Force Base for safekeeping. From there, at least one of the alien remains would be transferred to Fort Bannister in D.C. for further study, whilst the rest would disappear from history. The saucer itself would be tirelessly studied by American scientists for decades to come. Unfortunately, humanity at the time still did not yet possess the knowledge to reverse engineer the most significant technologies the craft provided, such as energy generation and anti-gravity. Fast forward to 2050, 8 years after the founding of Robco. It was at this point that renowned technologist and space enthusiast Robert House finally had enough influence to gain access to the old Roswell craft. Upon doing so, the anti-gravity enigma the UFO presented began to unravel slowly at first, and then rapidly. Robco soon picked up where the Third Reich left off during World War II, nearly a century prior, developing a prototype anti-gravity drive that bore a striking resemblance to the Die Glocke. Although Robco would ultimately be unable to grasp the full power of the Zetan anti-gravity technology before the world ended, Robco would successfully field the friendly neighborhood Eyebot, whose locomotion, curiously, relied on anti-gravity. Plausible? You tell me. As always, I look forward to seeing your answers to these questions in the comments. And hey, if you don't have any answers and you'd still like to help me appease the algorithm gods, just let me know what your favorite alien invasion flick is. I'd love to know. Also, hey, if you're like me and you care far too much about fictional vehicles, please consider joining my community Discord. I'd love to have you. Check out the video description if you are so inclined. Spydingo, out.